Welcome back to Close Up, where we continue our summer-long look at the candidates running in the congressional primaries. This morning, we're joined by State Representative Mindy Messmer, a Democrat from Rye, who's running in that very crowded Democratic primary there in the 1st Congressional District. So thanks for being here, Mindy.
Thank you so much.
As a state rep, you've been laser-focused on environmental issues. Scott Pruitt is now out at EPA. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Because he did seem like he at least was paying some attention to Coakley landfill and the PFAS issue.
I have been focused on environmental issues. That's how I started, but I have been working on some other issues as well in the State House, having to do with various civil and social justice issues. But, you know, I am concerned. You know, we just got off of a 2-day summit with Scott Pruitt's direction to do this, talking about PFAS issues on a national level, which was very, at least they were willing to listen to us. We don't know what was going to come out of that. Then we have this change of leadership again. First it was Kelly that was let go, and now it's Pruitt who has, you know, been ousted, basically. And I'm not so sure that we're in a better situation now with the replacement with Wheeler, because, you know, he has really clear ties to the coal industry, and he's maybe even worse than Pruitt was in terms of being really adept at passing policy that won't be beneficial to the public. So it's still yet to be seen what's going to happen and whether or not there's going to be some follow-through on some of these promises made, or at least some open listening to us in terms of these important issues that are now, you know, 611 bases across the United States now have been identified as having the same sort of situation with the contamination that we see at Pease. So you're talking about millions of people whose drinking water is threatened and whose health has probably been compromised by this.
And what is a safe drinking water level, in your opinion, you're a scientist, for PFAS, these perfluoroalkyl compounds or perfluorochemicals? Right.
Well, currently the EPA advisory is 70 parts per trillion, and the state of New Hampshire adopted that directly. And my bill, SB 309, that Dan Innes thankfully sponsored in the Senate this year, was just passed and signed by the governor the other day over at the beach in Janus Beach. And that will make the state look at lower standards, basically. It's going to make them look at protection of early childhood and prenatal children. And that's really important, because I think that when we're told by national scientists and international scientists that there really is no low safe level where they see no health effects from PFAS exposure in drinking water, that's very concerning. And just the other day, the state of Vermont, you know, they have one of the strictest standards, 20 parts per trillion. And just the other day, they added 3 other compounds. So now their total of 20 can't be in excess for any of those 5 compounds in total. So they have one of the strictest, right now, one of the strictest enforceable standards that we see. And I think that we are moving toward that. I mean, we need to add more of these PFAS compounds in. Your body doesn't differentiate in terms of the public health outcomes or the health outcomes you're going to see between these compounds. So there's no reason why, in a regulatory way, we should be, you know, excluding some and adding some and, you know, others. So I think it's important.
Speaking of public health, do you believe in Medicare for all?
I absolutely believe in Medicare for all. We need to make sure that everyone has access to high-quality, affordable health care, not just health insurance. You know, I think that we really need to elect people who aren't going to be beholden to the insurance agencies, insurance companies, the health insurance companies that are making a gob of money off of this current health insurance program that we have. And, you know, I think it's just, you know, it's a basic human right to be able to be treated. Predictions that I have seen, we are going to save $1 trillion the first year after Medicare for All is implemented. You know, it's a system that works already. We just need to expand it so other people can access it. And, you know, $1 trillion in savings from 22% of the industry's spending right now is in advertising. And then we're going to save $276 billion in the first year on administrative fees alone. And then $176 billion in reduced costs associated with drugs, because there will be a bigger negotiating platform from which the government can deal with pharmaceutical costs, which is a huge driver in health insurance, as you know, in health costs.
So perhaps the overall costs to the system go down, but the federal government is going to be paying an estimated $1.4 trillion per year. Where do you come up with that money?
Well, we save $1 trillion in the first year in terms of, from the predictions I've seen. So it's really only half, 0.4 or something increased costs. But, you know, we just appropriated $700 trillion to defense. We spend more than the next 10 countries in defense combined here in the United States. If we cut our defense spending by half, we'd still be spending twice what China spends. So I think there are some ways to prioritize our spending in the government. You know, this military-industrial complex, we do spend a lot of money on military readiness. I think there's some savings to be had there that we can appropriate to things like Medicare for All, where you know, we really want to make that stand and provide health insurance for all of our people. We're a first world nation here. You know, all of our people should be able to be covered by health insurance and not, you know, by health care, and not be $400 away from bankruptcy if there's a serious medical illness in their family.
As a state rep and a federal candidate, you've kind of got your feet in both worlds right
That's
now.
Right.
So what do you make of this Wayfair Supreme Court decision that would sort of make New Hampshire open potentially to online sales tax collections from other states? Should the state be taking action to stop that from happening?
Well, we are a state that doesn't have sales tax, so that would impose some additional costs on the state, because we'd have to set up an ability to tax. You know, those businesses would have to tax on the internet. They wouldn't be able to tax here in the state of New Hampshire. So I think there's some issues with regard to what that would cost the state. I think, you know, we've made a decision here in the state to not have income tax right now, or sales tax. So I think that, you know, that's something that needs to be looked at. And we have a special session coming up. As you know, we've been called back. We are going to hear from the task force that's been set up to look at this issue, so we're going to look at that. Do
you see yourself voting for these protections, though, to stop these collections from happening in New Hampshire?
I'd have to look at it a little bit more and decide for sure what I'm going to do.
HB 1264, voting rights. Do you think this is going to have an impact long-term on who gets to vote here in New Hampshire, or will we just see people go through the process and perhaps get a driver's license? Well,
it is certainly going to make it more difficult for college students to vote. It is a targeted bill to make it more difficult for college students to vote, and basically we know that most college students tend to be Democrats. So it's very concerning that this bill has been found constitutionally appropriate. I'm hoping that, you know, we saw some people from New Hampshire Youth Movement talk to Chris Sununu about whether he's going to sign this bill back before this happened, and he committed to not signing the bill. Now that it has been found constitutionally appropriate, I'm concerned that I've seen signals that he's going to sign it. And I think we want to make it easier for people to vote. I mean, we have a problem that, you know, most people are not participating in the democratic process here in our country, and we want to make sure that people can access and be actively involved in what your government's doing for you by voting. So we don't want to make it harder for people. We want to make it easier for people.
You're one of 11 candidates running in this primary on the Democratic side, but only 3 women. Have you encountered any sexism in this race?
I would say, you know, there's certainly, you know, a male component to the race, but, you know, I'm focusing on my race. I'm focusing on what I think is important. I think it's important to get back to, for the party, to get back to its activism roots. You know, I came through this not as a career politician, but I came to this as somebody who was concerned about a public health issue in our community, and I got involved without ever intending to be, you know, being an elected official whatsoever, much less a congressional candidate. So I think that's important to get back to those activism roots. I think grassroots community activism is important. I think the Unity Commission, that was one of their major goals for the party. They said you need to get back to the 1960s era, you know, real connection of the party to community activism, and to put up barriers or to, you know, talk about how somebody's time has come to be the established one to win this race, or to have people come in from outside of the state and move here and you know, try to win this race is, you know, disturbing. I think this should come from within. This should come from the people, have a connection to the person who's running, who sees them as someone who understands the needs and the wants of the people of the communities that they are representing. And I think that's why I've seen such outgrowth of support for this campaign. Tom Steyer was just here. He was just on the show. Do you think he's on the right track when he calls for the impeachment of President Donald Trump? You know, I think we'll have to see if the Russian influence in this election is real. And if it was real, we basically have an administration that wasn't really elected you know, fairly by the people. So when you talk about impeaching one person and then having Pence, you're talking about an administration that maybe shouldn't have been here then, if that's what has really happened. But I think, you know, we need to see whether or not there have been some legal activities or not, and then and work from there. All right. Representative Mindy Messmer, candidate for Congress. We'll see you out on the trail. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.